Hello, everyone. Oh, yeah.
I have very lovely, I've got Miriam from Bavaria in the chat. And of course, I'm from Munich. So, hello. Guten
Ah,
Abend.
love that.
Yes, so from my home people. Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to
Yes.
our monthly live chat. We love to have you here. Hi, Sue. Sue even joined us. I think she's still on vacation. Hi, Sandra, on my side. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. We know that we kind of had to pick a different time. Our time
Yes.
changes always mess with us.
Yes, and it's not the same. It's sort of out of sync. So we sort of met in the middle. So
That's
from next
right.
month, it'll be back to normal for all of us. But this
Yes.
month, we're slightly out of sync. And I think it's not very good for us either. I was definitely not ready today. But we're really excited because our topic for this month, I think it's one of those topics we're always asked about. I think
Yeah.
sleeves and trousers are
Yes.
just such a great topic. So today we're talking about sleeves. So it's perfect timing because Tisha just taught a sleeve
I did.
class.
We
So she
just did
has
a
lots of
sleeve class
questions
last night.
already.
You can still watch the replay if anyone missed it. But if you're wanting to talk, I've got, some of my regulars here in the chat ready to talk more about sleeves. I love you guys, pattern nerds. Here we are. And if you could do us a favor, if you're seeing this, can you push that like button, or you said hype? There's a
Yes,
hype thing now.
that's if you're watching recording on mobile. You
Okay.
can you can
Hype
swipe
it.
to the right and you can hype it, and I think that does the magic at the moment in
So
YouTube.
that does help us
Yeah,
and reach more people. Thank
yes,
you. Should
and of course
we?
that's what we all what our life is all about. If you haven't watched us before, we meet once a month on a Thursday, normally at 3 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. UK time,
Yeah.
to talk about some real pattern nerd issues because we both love pattern cutting. We know a lot of you do, and we know there are not a lot of spaces where we can talk openly about pattern cutting for
Yeah.
an hour.
Just
So this
dive
is our
in.
monthly meetup, yes, and we always pick a topic. We can sort of share, hopefully, something helpful for you to help you with your own pattern cutting and sewing projects. And it's also, we take your questions. So you get our shared knowledge, our probably 40, 50 years shared experience
Yeah.
and expertise to help you with your project. And why don't you start, Trisha, if people haven't met you?
Yes. Okay. Hello. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. My name's Trisha, your pattern nerd friend. As I say, my background is in costuming. So for big theatrical productions, think Disney, Blue Man Group, Cirque du Soleil, Broadway shows, that kind of thing. So that's where I've learned all about fitting and pattern making outrageous shapes in no time. But now I have an online membership, which is actually, that's what all these names are right here, is these are all of our new students. We have opened the doors just for this week. So we are in a big celebration of all of our new sewing friends, teaching pattern making, fitting, and all those things that go along with it. And just love always learning more and sharing with anyone who is willing and happy to talk about all of these things. And Charlotta and I have had this going for a couple years now. We just really enjoy coming together, having these conversations, learning from you guys too, like hearing what your opinions and questions are in the chat, and we love sharing that with you. And then Charlotta is great because she comes from a little bit of a different background as well.
Yes, I do. And I think we've been doing this for 5 years, Trisha.
5
Just to
years,
really
serious?
scare people from watching us for 5 years. So yes,
Wow.
I'm Charlotta. My background is, oh, sorry, not clapping, is pattern cutting and fashion design. So completely different from Trisha. So we got, I think, which makes us really compatible because you're American. I'm British, but via Germany, so again different. And I have a fashion design background, so I worked actually mostly as a fashion designer, but my passion's always been pattern cutting because that's where clothes really become alive. So
That's
fashion
the that's
designers
the
say yes,
key to
ideas,
everything.
pattern cutters make it happen.
That's right.
And I love everything from, again, like Trisha, I like a really outrageous project. That's what I studied. That's what I sort of did professionally, partly as well. But I also just love making really wearable clothes which fit you and are your style. So, simple tops and exactly the fabric and the fit you want. There's nothing better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having a power to do the simplest
And
thinking
the thing I
everything.
love about your account and your teaching is your, attention and analysis of a lot of like vintage designs, vintage,
Thank you.
designer things as
But
well.
again,
So
I think it's like in real life, where do we ever have, how many people do you meet? I know there's some people out there. It's lovely when you meet people who love fashion as well, or pattern cutting, even better. But most of the time, you just get sort of raised eyebrows. So it's nice to have somewhere online we can literally talk for 40 minutes about Pierre Cardin. But I'm
that's how
really
you know
dive
you
in.
found your people.
Yes, no. And it's actually when it happens in real life, it's amazing, isn't it? Where you sort of have an
Yes.
appointment somewhere, suddenly you start talking, wow, somebody's the same interest.
So that's why we like coming together on these lives and just giving us an opportunity for us to hang out, but also to hang out with all of you and help you, hopefully gain that confidence in your own pattern cutting, your own designing, and your own fitting that you're working on, because both of us believe that, this should be accessible, and we want you to have the skills and the confidence to make clothes that you feel really good in, and maybe even help others through clients and whatnot as well feel the same way. So
Yeah,
yes,
but
that's
you're
right.
fitting, yeah,
Sue's joining
fitting
us
people.
from the Canary Islands is where she
Ooh,
is.
very nice.
And Victoria's getting ready for her vacation. So glad that you guys jumped on with us.
Yes, especially if you're on holiday, so that's
I
great.
know, I know.
Yes.
It's so wonderful.
And I
So
think, so,
I know you got some questions, but did we want to start with some basics
yeah.
first, or what do you think?
Yeah, maybe I think we should talk about why sleeves are so tricky. I think sleeves, a lot of people, I know people who actually never do sleeves. They
Because
just
of
do
that, yeah.
sleeveless garments. Um, and shall we just talk? Yeah, let's talk about through what one of the reasons why sleeves are so tricky is because you need to have your bodice fitted first.
Yeah.
So what makes sleeve tricky is like a bodice when you fit it, it's about your shoulders and your bust really. That's the sort
Yeah.
of relationship to fit it nicely, and then like your curves. But with a sleeve, we are sort of having to fit it onto an existing garment. So you're not only having to fit the sleeve itself, sometimes fitting issues come up which are due to the bodice, and that makes it really hard to diagnose what is wrong. So if armhole is too big, if it's too tight, if that shoulder point is in the wrong position, if you have not enough room around here,
Yeah.
they all cause issues in the sleeve, even if the bodice looked fine beforehand.
Right. Without the
And I
sleeve.
think that's what makes it so difficult to fit. And I would always say when people are making a sleeve, actually check the bodice is actually correct. And I need to turn Trisha up a little bit. Are you? Is
Oh
everybody
yes,
else
can you
fine
hear
with the
us?
sound? We should ask.
Yeah.
And
We
I will
always
turn.
try, you guys, and we can see, we are broadcasting from two different places. So my sound might sound different here on my channel versus what your guys hearing on Charlotta's channel. So please let us know. But we do, I promise, every time we jump on, we're like, how do we sound? And we try to get it right. But please let us know. Kristen saying, I agree. The sleeve is challenging as the crotch curve, or more so arms reach in more directions than legs,
Yeah,
so.
I think it's similar. I think both legs and sleeves are really tricky for that reason as well, because they're tubes, they're really narrow tubes, which means already like it twists really quickly. And then again, like it's because you think, oh yeah, it's just straight, but your legs aren't straight. You have your calves, your knees. Are you standing straight outwards? And the same with your arms,
Yeah,
Like,
and
if
what
you
kind of
stand like
movement do you need,
yeah,
and
but yeah. So the
so
challenge is always like, so my top tip, before you actually fit your sleeve, you check your bodice is correct. And that means that you have enough room across the chest that it's actually hitting where your arm's eye is.
yeah.
So quite often when we fit a bodice, we actually maybe go a little bit in too much or a little bit out. And either of those can cause issue. Going out
And with your shoulder too, I find that's a lot. Like if your shoulder's not quite where it's supposed to be and you put a sleeve on it, then things start pulling funny because they don't have the room to move from where that shoulder starts.
It as well, doesn't it? And the same as an armhole, it needs to be in the right position.
Yeah.
So not too low, not too high. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like for example, Trisha's doing something, wearing something sleeveless. So
I
that's
am. It's kind of like this is going past my shoulder, so it's kind of like a
yes.
grown on sleeve almost. But yeah, I know. I wore a sleeved garment yesterday for my class, and I'm like, I don't know if I have anything else. It's starting to warm up here, so I'm like, I don't know that I want to wear sleeves today. But I do have a couple of mock-ups here, and I have my hoodie, which also has sleeves,
But
but
yes, and if it's the shoulder is slightly too wide, that isn't as big an issue as if it's too narrow. You
yeah.
know, like a chopped shoulder, it can be a fashion choice. That's more like I find it's if it's slightly in the wrong place outwards, it sometimes looks a bit unflattering,
Yeah,
depending
it
on
can
what
look
you.
wide
If
and
you,
it can.
yeah, if you're narrow shouldered, sometimes it's actually better. But if you're broad shouldered, it doesn't quite work. Um, so
Yeah, and we went through, every time we open the doors to the pattern place, we do a free boot camp, which happened last week, and we focus on the fitting of the bodice and how to make adjustments. And we always do, because a very common adjustment for a lot of especially bustier ladies have like that gapping in the armhole and pinning out that extra dart. And I always love when people are like, well, if you change the armhole, don't you have to change the sleeve? And it's like, yes, you do, which is why it's good to look at your bodice or your body of whatever you're putting your sleeve into first, and then start adding the sleeve. But I also want to say that like you mentioned at the beginning, Charlotta, that it can be, like your sleeve can fit or your bodice can fit just fine, and then you put the sleeve in and it brings a whole new barrel of
yes,
fun things
yeah,
to work out. So that happens frequently. So if that's happened to you, don't get discouraged. It's not that
yeah.
you failed at fitting your bodice. It's just you're adding another element back in, and some fine
And it
tuning
can
might need to
happen in the
happen.
strangest places as well.
Yeah.
Like underneath your arm at the back. Quite often it fits really nicely without a sleeve, and you put a sleeve in, and suddenly you get all these drag lines. You just think that was perfect beforehand. So
Yeah.
that's always surprising. So yeah, so basically check your bodice basically has enough room, and the arm hole is actually following your arm's eye, which is literally your arm's eye. So that it's the shape of where your arm goes into the body. And that's a sort of starting point for success. And then with the sleeve, I think for most of us, there's always going to be fitting issue. Um, what was I say with sleeves? For success, I actually think having the armhole the right shape that's the most important part to get it right to begin with. And then you're always going to have issues how it hangs, but sometimes that's quite easy to fix. But if there's an issue with your bodice, it will make everything much harder to fix later
And
on.
the way that I started in the class yesterday, the thing that I always go to first as a pattern maker when I'm getting ready to go into the sleeve is measuring that. And maybe we could talk about this for a second, but the relationship between the sleeve cap and the armhole, and so calculating how much ease is included. When we're talking about woven sleeves, at least,
Yes.
when we're talking about knit sleeves, it's not as important, obviously, but getting that ease to be what you need it to be, and understanding how to adjust that is kind of the key to helping you, like, oh no, I took this amount out of my bodice. What do I do to my sleeve? Like understanding that relationship and how to make that adjustment.
Yes, and that's quite true. And also, it's a sort of that's also related to your bicep width, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's always like your armhole needs to be bigger than your bicep width. So if you have a really loose sleeve and a really tight armhole, that's never going to work because
Yeah.
you won't be able to get a sleeve cap. And I think one of the things people always ask us, and we can actually talk about it, I know Miriam asked about it as well, is how tight can you make your armhole? And why does Trisha love a tight armhole?
Yeah.
You want to tell us, Trisha?
Yeah, we did talk about it in class yesterday. It's so counterintuitive because you're like, my armhole's so tight and I can't move, so I'm gonna just make it bigger, right? And then what happens is you actually cause more problems by making it bigger, because especially if you have a fitted bodice and if you're going to move your sleeve, if it's bigger, it actually starts pulling from the bodice as you're moving, so it can restrict movement. So actually having a tighter armhole, hugging more of your armhole, you actually get more movement by
And
being able to have
because
a tighter
the
armhole.
underarm point is like your hinge on a
Right.
door. So if it's much lower down, you have less movement. If it's higher up, you actually have more movement.
Yeah. Because it's like, on my hoodie, which has a set-in sleeve, but it has a dropped armhole. But if I go to lift, it's pulling from my body. Now this has stretch in it, so I still have movement. But if it was higher up, I would be able to move my arm more freely because it's not trying to pull from the body of my garment and restrict that movement. Usually you feel it across your bicep.
And your whole dress will start pulling up as well.
Right.
So I think a general rule is, if you want to have a fitted sleeve and movement, you need to have a tight armhole, and you can even put a gusset in there.
Yes.
Or if you want to have a loose sleeve and lots of movement, you need to have a big armhole. Big sleeve makes good movement, but also when you probably won't have a sleeve cap.
Right.
So if you have a really loose sleeve, the reason you have your movement is because your sleeve is cut more like this. And if you look at any t-shirt block, that is very much cut like that. Men's shirting, again, if you think a men's shirt has quite a low armhole, but it is actually cut like this. And that's why it's got lots of movement, because I know you always tell a story about the ballroom dancing again.
Yeah.
That is cut in that position. So that allows lots of movement.
Which, just to point that out, because as I've been studying sleeves this week, when you have it fitted, you have to really consider, and that's why I do always bring up that ballroom adjustment that we did, that situation, let me make the words come together. When you have to really think about how you want it to look the best, because while having an armhole that has a shorter cap so that it's really fit to look really nice as your arm is standing out to the side, when you have your arm down, it's going to likely cause drag lines. You're going to get other drag lines. So there is a bit of a compromise that you have to think about when you are fitting sleeves, when you're deciding what sleeves you want. Like, do you want the movement? Are you worried about the drag lines? Actually, I was just watching a reel today that I saw on Instagram talking about traditional Chinese pattern cutting versus Western modern Chinese cutting. So I guess in the Chinese culture, when they are doing the traditional tops and such, they try to not have a shoulder seam, not have a set-in sleeve, because it reduces fabric, the cutting of the fabric. You have less pieces and you can put it together. And she says, now you'll notice that because it's cut that way, I have all these drag lines here, because you don't have that tight armhole. You have it essentially drafted to be like this. Like, this is the T, it goes down the front, it goes down the back. And then when she had her Western cut version of the same top out of the same fabric, it did fit her much nicer, in and around that shoulder area. And she didn't have the drag lines there, but essentially you could be using more fabric, cutting into more fabric, and having more seaming. So it really, you have to kind of think about the movement that you're wanting, and what drag lines, wrinkles are you willing to accept, and what's really the most important about that you're trying to achieve with this garment.
And it sort of becomes quite interesting, because if you sort of want the perfectly molded cut, if you look at the tailor jacket, it has a two-piece sleeve, it's molded to you, it's padded exactly, it fits perfectly. But the movement can actually be relatively restricted.
Yes.
So that's why if you look at, for example, for driving, if you ever tried on a really well-fitted coat, quite often driving is really uncomfortable because it's sort of forward movement. But of course, as soon as you wanted forward movement, you will get some volume at the back.
Yeah.
And again, if you sort of look at the satin sleeve, basically, I would say, has the biggest possibility for beautiful fit.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you want to have a grown-on sleeve, you will have a gusset sleeve.
Yeah.
But if you look outside that sort of thing, even all the sort of anything historical, there's so many different solutions for that, like Tisha said, the Chinese tissue garments, the whole sort of Eurasia, you can sort of see
Yeah.
how, so from Europe to Asia, that whole sort of big continent, you can see all the different, how they all develop their own versions of it to get the movement, the fit, and you get really
Yeah.
interesting versions of it. But you will always end up a little bit with volume below that. But it is often the most fabric conscious. Well, of course, the satin sleeve. People are always amazed when we draft sleeves, how when you do like a fitted bodice, it's actually quite a small piece compared to the sleeve. The sleeve is really massive, isn't it? And wasteful in fabric.
Yes, the sleeves always cause so much. You're like, oh, I can fit it on this garment, but now the sleeves, and you can't like double them up if it's narrow, that kind of thing. You're like, oh, I can only fit one sleeve. You know, it's always playing that pattern Tetris.
Yes,
fabric
what you
Tetris.
mentioned earlier about ease is really interesting because we sort of ease is like, I think most sleeves have ease in the cap, so that is sort of a little bit of extra here which you sort of ease in and it gives you better fit. I actually, on my blocks quite often, I have no ease because then I know exactly it fits perfectly, and then I can add
your ease.
the ease
Interesting.
for better fit. So, because if you're working in a wool, what the ease basically does it, because we have curves here, and the pattern is flat. So by easing it, you get that beautiful curve here.
You can hug. I always describe it. It's like hugging that shoulder ball, right? Because you want your seam, which is hard to see on my sweatshirt, but you want your seam to hit right before it goes into that shoulder. So if your armhole seam is hugging where you want it to be hugging for a set-in sleeve, you know, how do you get that curvature going over the shoulder? And that's where the ease comes in and helps with that.
But you can actually, when you draft your block, you can sort of do a compromise. So I sort of draft on the block I use, I have it drafted like this, so it hasn't got any ease. But then I know if I want a really well-fitted block, I add a bit of extra ease in. But if you're then making it, for example, out of a fabric which doesn't allow ease, I know exactly it will fit perfectly.
Right.
But if you want a beautiful fit, for example, on like a tailored coat, there might be 5 centimeters ease in them. And then it's just steamed in, and you need a really good iron and
that's the thing, when you've got a wool or a natural fiber, you can do that. I remember I made a raincoat out of vinyl. And I had to take the ease out of my sleeve because I'm like, that's not easing. There's no easing that. So,
and there are sort of general rules because it's quite interesting. One of the questions, like on Instagram, I put out, have you got any questions? And somebody actually, how do you calculate the ease for different sizes? So how would you do that, Trisha? Like for small size compared to really big size?
I mean, I usually use like a range of what I'm looking for with ease, depending on if it's a fabric that isn't going to ease versus a wool or something nice. And if I know that I can shrink it down with the steam and whatnot. So I usually go from anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches allowance. And that kind of like, depending on the variables with what I'm working with, I will adjust. And the way that I adjust isn't always in the bicep. I usually try to split it up equally amongst the whole sleeve. I have a question for you, actually, that I've been kind of curious about, and I'd love to know your opinion. It's not really on ease. It's more on making adjustments.
Oh, shall I quickly say what because I was thinking about it. I think it's one of those, I think if you draft it, I wonder how proportionally done it is. I've never been a grader. So
I never really, I guess, and to answer your question, I've never really thought about it changing per size, right? Like,
no, I was thinking, I guess you could increase it a little bit because you, for a, like say the biggest size, which is like a 5XL or something, you do have more room there.
Right.
But you don't always have a curve which is that much more pronounced.
Right,
so
right.
I think because you don't grade everything up, you don't grade your neckline as up as other parts.
Right.
So I'm just looking in my book on sizes to see if I say anything about it. But what question did you want to ask me?
Yeah, I was curious.
I was saying what 2 to 3 centimeters is the sort of average ease I would go for, which is about 1 inch.
About an inch. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, did
Sorry.
you see me start looking for a measuring tape? I'm like, what does that mean? You'd think by this time in my life that I would just
We
know
would
these
both
things,
know.
but yeah, 2 centimeters, about an inch. Yeah, so that's about
Yeah, it's sort of.
the same range. And I mean, everybody has their different things, and we should maybe talk about, after I ask this question, about cap height was the other thing that I talked a lot about last night,
Yes.
because that's what we're talking about with the sleeve being fitted, whether your arm is straight out or down. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. But my question that I had, and I was curious what your thought was on it, from a pattern nerd perspective, is and I've even referenced like Gina Renee's book, and she kind of offers both ways. When you make an adjustment to your bodice, so say you're like you're fitting a standard bodice, or you're fitting your sloper that you haven't fit in a long time, and you're having to make some corrections, right? So originally the sleeve and the bodice fit together, perfect, right amount of ease, all of that. So then you make a change. Either you take it in the shoulder seam, or you take in that gap, in the armhole, or the gap in the back. Like, you make an adjustment that affects the armhole. Do you change? Like, let's say we'll use the example of the gapping in the front. So if you pinch out a dart in the front and correct the bodice in that way, do you change and alter the sleeve where you're only adjusting the front of the sleeve, or do you disperse that throughout the whole sleeve cap, the amount that you remove from the front?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I've always made the adjustment across the whole sleeve. Like, I'm looking at the armhole measurement and the sleeve cap measurement, and how they go together. And then I adjust where that shoulder notch is depending on how it hangs on the body. But I'm curious whether I've never really tried, or I haven't had a lot of instances where I would only take it out of the front of the sleeve.
Now the thing is, I think, because you can sort of just take it out here, or you can, for example, depending on whether you want your sleeve the same width, you would then maybe lower your sleeve cap a bit.
You could lower the cap,
the ease, which make it tighter. I wonder how much of a difference it makes. So whether you do a cutting line here and you decrease the
I guess, the reason that I guess I'll explain why I think it makes more sense to me to disperse it along the whole cap, unless you're seeing it on the body. I'm talking like initially, because then I think I make different adjustments on the body.
Yes.
If you're like needing to add more in the back, maybe some of that goes to the sleeve, some of it goes to the body, and then you're not ending up with a symmetrical cap like we do, this is already cut up and adjusted, but you're not ending up with a symmetrical cap. Like, maybe there is more of a bulbous, like, on the back, it doesn't have to be the same curve. But I'm saying to start, to me, like, if you're to make an adjustment just out of the center or just out of the front, because it's such a curved piece, that curve can really get
distorted.
Right.
Because quite often that's what happens if you draft to individual measurements. You end up with a sleeve which is already really uneven.
Yeah.
Like this is like your perfect sleeve.
Right.
When you draft made to measure, your sleeve doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
For most of us, the front curve is longer than the back curve, for example. So that's why I'm thinking, if it's just an average one, I would just take it out, because these sort of curves, to a certain degree, you're sort of just making it a bit shorter, but it's sort of in this area, isn't it?
Yeah.
So as long as you sort of keep it out there, I think it still fit fine. But if it's individual, then you would sort of literally take it out where it's needed. But it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I was curious because, like I said, I even was like referencing books and stuff, and she showed either you would make the 1-to-1, basically, like you pinched out a 1/2 inch, then you would take a 1/2 inch out of your front. But her example that she was showing was on a short sleeve. So, because if you're taking a long sleeve and trying to, excuse me, take out, pinch out all the way, then you're going all the way down, and it's like affecting the whole, even past the
hang of the
bicep.
garment, yeah.
Yeah, the whole hang of it and the whole balance of everything. So, or her thing was either you do that or you shorten, like you mentioned, you shorten the sleeve cap or the sleeve height rather. But then that could cause drag lines, you know, and things like that. So and that's, I think that to me, that's what makes fitting a sleeve so difficult, is that there's so many variables, and it's like you could change one thing, like the measurements could match up, you know, and fit perfectly, but then you're still seeing like crazy distortion. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna fix this thing, but then I have to make it match again. You know, it's a lot of back and forth.
So I'm getting lots of questions.
Oh, good.
Yes, but people like your question about. I think as well, Gina, Renee, it's for sewing patterns. So you would make up the whole pattern and then you fit it, wouldn't you? That's
right, and she does do fitting with the sleeve in it already.
Yes,
you know, so because that makes a difference too.
Stuff like that, like making the armhole tighter. If you make to measure, you always do that first.
Right.
You know, when you fit your bodice. And then your sleeve is sort of already based on that sort of asymmetric armhole. Yes, it's an interesting, I actually think it probably would make sense to take it out of the front. And I also wonder whether you will have to do something where you, rather than just taking it out diagonally, like straight downwards, where it distorts, whether you actually do something where you go more like this.
Yeah, where you could like pinch out, and then you could bring in the underarm seams if it got too wide or something.
Yes, and sort of take it to the middle. But all these
that's
sort
an
of
interesting
things,
way to do it.
Quite often, that's what I think with, you know, if you have a bust which is just too tight or a bust which is too big, that's always like quite straightforward. With sleeve, it's sort of, it gets a little bit more complicated, I think, often.
Yeah.
It just makes
and I think the other thing to think about too is it could fit beautifully as your arm is hanging naturally in its natural state, but as soon as, like you said, you start to drive or cook or flex your muscle in any way, it expands. So there's that ease in the overall sleeve that you have to consider as well. I have a question from Carolyn. She says, with a shoulder sleeve adjustment to align with the ear, right? That's what I always say. Is that when the ease essentially rotates with the cap? Good question.
Oh, is it
so basically like moving, so let's say the armhole measurement doesn't change. But the shoulder seam moves forward or backwards is what she's saying. So usually you want to split the sleeve between, or the ease between the front and the back. But if your shoulder seam moves, I think you're still, the ease is still split. You still want to split that extra space between the front and the back. It's just your shoulder notch moves with your shoulder seam.
Yes.
So it shouldn't affect the ease at that point. It's a matter of moving the notch and where it's placed.
So if you have, like, for example, a yoke or something, isn't it, that moves? So what you would then do is you will have notches up here where you do your ease in between and you do it evenly. So so you wouldn't really, your ease still stays up here. Even if your shoulder seam isn't up there, because you could have a top without a shoulder seam. You know, in theory. But this ease would still be in that area.
Right.
I thought you were talking about rotating the sleeve forward, because I thought we finish off with talking about
coat
on Instagram.
And I didn't get to that part last night, but I do have another inside the membership. Actually, we talk about rotating the sleeve. Is that what's going on with your coat, you think?
Well, it's fascinating because this is a board I've taken off a sleeve, so I can actually show it at some point. It's for video, but I'm going to show it on the other sleeve. This is a board coat. I just love the color, and, you know.
It is gorgeous.
But it's always interesting. With board garments, I don't really worry how bad, you know, I know.
Yeah, we don't expect them to fit perfectly.
Yes, but it's really interesting, all the fitting issues people pointed out. So what I was talking about, is, if I have my arm in my natural position, can you see all these lines here?
Yeah.
And that's, if you were looking at that on a garment, on a drafted garment, you would think about rotating your sleeve, because I think that sleeve is drafted. Can you see if I stand like this? Like very straight.
It's a little bit better.
It hangs much nicer.
Yeah.
So it's literally, for my personal figure, it needs to be rotated forward. And then the other thing is,
Do you think it's rotated forward or it's rotated back?
Sorry, yes. Sort
Yeah.
of
Okay.
backwards, but the
Yeah.
sleeve
Yes.
comes
Yes.
forward.
So
Yes,
that it
yeah.
shifts
So,
your sleeve forward. You're right.
yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
But the other thing is, because we are talking about in a live Q&A on my pattern cutting membership, a lot of us stand with our elbows, ignore that sleeve, with our elbows rotated outwards.
Yep.
So when you look at drafting, it's actually supposed to be, I think, basically drafted like this to stand, but most of us stand like this, which then points out your elbow.
Yeah.
So I think on this sleeve, first of all, it needs to go forward, but then because I stand like this, that makes it even worse. So it's sort of, really, this needs a two-piece sleeve, I think.
Yeah, a two-piece, and that's why I think most coats go with a two-piece sleeve, because they are drafted to be more curved, and you have more control over the fit. I'm curious, on your sleeve blocks that you draft and that you use, do you keep the elbow dart in?
On the really basic block, I don't. So at the basic block, it's just quite it's either if you do like a 1/4 block, I keep it completely straight.
Yeah.
But or slightly in. But yes, the next step would be to create the elbow dart, where you basically you shift it, and you extra room you creates an elbow dart.
Right.
So yeah, that will always help with fitting. But again, for block, I want the most basic. On where I can do lots of stuff.
And that's what I've done. I mean, the book that I follow and learn from the most and talk about all the time is Helen Joseph Armstrong's fashion, pattern making for fashion design, and she drafts her block with that elbow dart. But when I've created my slopers that I give to students, it's like this coat that you're wearing now. It doesn't have the elbow dart, and most modern clothing don't include that. So I want to my slopers are drafted to basically as a teaching tool for learning pattern cutting, learning pattern making. But
so can you sort of see the basic sleeve? You can see at the top, it's completely straight.
Yeah.
And then what I sometimes do is you just bring it in a little bit.
Yeah.
But then what Trisha is talking about, which is a much better sleeve, is like a darted sleeve like that.
Yeah.
For example. There's different versions of a darted sleeve as well, of course.
Yes.
This is quite a vintage one. Like in more contemporary ones, there's different versions of it. But if you really get into making your own clothes, I would always recommend it, and especially if you are that sort of forward-standing one, a dart will really help. But a block, in a way, as you said, it's like the most basic one, and then you always can adapt it later on. And it's very quick to make the darted block if you needed to do
right add that dart in, and that's I'm always thinking about it with my slopers when I drafted them. It's like, what is going to be the most useful for what they're trying to achieve, and what is going to be the least amount of friction to get there. So that's why on my back bodice block, we don't have the shoulder dart, because again, most modern clothes don't have that shoulder dart in the back. Even though it does create a really nice shape and a nice fit, I just saw myself in class going, here's how we getting that constant question. How do I get rid of this dart? How do I get rid of this dart? But, what's funny is that since I removed that dart for that reason, I've now talked about how adding it back in, because it does cause, gapping in the back, and there's different issues that causes because you don't have that dart to hug in over the shoulder blade. But I think that's still good to bring up that conversation, because that happens a lot in modern clothing and modern patterns as well.
And that's quite interesting. I also think it's because this drafting, I used to use a drafting system where you drafted it with a shoulder dart and you drafted it with a bust dart up here. I've now changed. One of my students, Eva, she developed a system for all bust sizes.
Yes,
and
I remember.
And that doesn't have a shoulder dart, and it hasn't. The bust dart is somewhere else, so you can fit it. But then it's much easier to draft the back much quicker if you don't have to calculate the darts and stuff.
Right.
And as you said, the great thing is it's so individual, and you literally just pinch it out of the armhole.
And there's your dart.
Actually learn. It isn't actually the shoulder, the shaping, which happens. The fitting issue for the shape is the armhole. So if you're happy with a looser armhole, you don't need your shoulder dart. But if
Right.
you want the hugging thing, it's actually the armhole which is causing the issue or showing the issue as such.
Showing, yeah, for sure. That's a
Um,
great point.
and
Vic-
Angela is just asking, can you share the name of the sewing book again, the one you used, which is Helen Armstrong
Oh,
Black,
Helen Joseph Farm. I was like, which one? I've
Joseph
mentioned a
Armstrong,
couple,
yes.
and then you showed maybe she was talking about your book because you were showing a book too.
I wouldn't use this for teaching what I'm doing. This is
It's more for pattern nerd reference. This
yeah, it's a
is
really good reference
this
book.
is an old. I've had it for far too long and used it way too much. I mean, can you? So, but this is Pattern Making for Fashion Design. She has a new cover nowadays by Helen Joseph Armstrong is the book. Victoria Hannah is asking, I found I have much more success crimping sleeve cap instead of gathering. Oh yeah, that crimping technique. I've seen that.
Yes, I've seen it too.
I haven't tried it yet. I haven't been in a situation where I had fabric that would make sense for that. When I pin, I kind of wrap fabric around my finger and slightly stretch it. No more tucks unless the size is not right. That's a great tip. Thank you, Victoria.
I think that's a great thing about the internet to a certain degree. So
Yes.
you learn all these things, and it is visually much easier to see in video format, which is why we both teach in video, isn't it? Rather than, so yeah, I was going to say this book, this is a classic British pattern cutting book, which is really straightforward. If you're in
Is
Germany,
that
you
Winifred
might-
Aldrich? No.
Yes.
Yes,
And
yeah. It's
I
usually
can-
those two are like the
yes,
main ones.
And actually, Winifred Aldrich,
oh, you say it so
slightly
perfectly
older
with your
one is-
German accent.
Oh, yes, yeah, because she has a German name as well. Natalie Bray, she's.
Oh yes, I've heard really
before
good
that
things
time.
about her. I don't have any of her books.
No, I think a lot of books are based on her. And so this is quite a complicated book because it's made for professional one, Philip Kunick. You can get it quite cheaply. This is sort of, I haven't tried his blocks out. I want to try his blocks because he
drafts.
drafts, for example, the trouser block. I've never seen a trouser block drafted like this. But I know like
Interesting.
Jennifer Stern is doing like all these trouser block methods, and there's so many different
There's so
methods.
many. I mean, that's the cool thing and maybe frustrating for those getting
Yeah.
started.
And like, yeah, if you have time to try them out all out,
Right,
that's
right.
great. But who has, isn't it? It'd be
If we could only just play patterns all day long.
You take a year out, two different block systems.
Ah, the dream. Yeah.
It's fun. And Deborah's just saying she would like a book tour of my workroom.
Yeah.
I sort of do it from time to time, but a lot of them are
We
sort of
do.
very-
Yeah, we
I
do
will
share our book.
definitely do it.
In fact, I think because it came up in my boot camp last week, people were asking if they could have a book list. And I've done several of them, but I don't have one ready to go because it changes all the time. You know, like I find and discover new books. Actually, oh, do I have it? There's a newest book that I got for the plus size drafting. And I just
And
got it, and I
Deborah-
haven't even had the moment to look through it, but I'm really, really excited about it.
think
This
I've
is a brand
seen
new
that,
book that
yes.
just came out,
I've seen that.
and I've heard really good things already, but I really am looking forward to like digging into this and trying things out, especially for, you know, our curvier friends.
I think the problem what you will find is this books like that. A lot of books aimed at universities, they're incredibly expensive.
It wasn't
yeah.
cheap. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
but it's also such a great resource, you know, and
Yes.
the thing, I mean, I bet Winifred Aldrich and I know Helen Joseph Armstrong is not incredibly cheap either, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I bought that when I was in college
Yeah.
many years ago, and I still use it to this day, you know, so
Yeah.
they are an investment, but it's such a great resource.
Read some reviews and stuff, for example.
Yes.
That's what I would say. And for both Miriam and Deborah, because you are my pattern cutting school, there is actually on the community, there's a book tab. And I've actually done lists.
Ah.
I've done books for sewing, books for pattern cutting, books for fitting. And I think fitting is actually where I have the shortest list, because I haven't yet met a book like, you know, like Helen Armstrong Black. You would say that's the perfect pattern cutting book. Winifred Aldrich is pretty perfect,
Yeah.
pretty straightforward. Natalie Bray is perfect, but with fitting, I think it's so visual and 3D, and
It's
it's so
it's
much.
really
Yeah,
hard to. I think Gina
it's
Renee does a fabulous job
yeah,
with her book. And the thing I like about her book, which is so fabulous with most authors nowadays, is that they include the QR codes that then take you to a video that can show you
yeah.
visually.
I was
Um,
gonna say there's also one by Sarah. Is it Sarah Veblen? And she includes photos, and I find that really useful,
and
for
I
example,
also
because I get.
like Cash Moret's book, Ahead of the
Oh yes,
Curve,
yeah.
is a really nice one as well.
Yeah. But I think that's why I love video format, because it's a little
Yeah.
bit easier to actually sort of show it and show the process as
And
well.
it's just so hard, and this is what I talk about every time with fitting, is it's really hard. And when I make like YouTube videos, and I mean, you have that example of your coat that you bought, so you're like, this is what's wrong with this coat. It's so hard to recreate something that doesn't fit how you want it not to fit so that you can show how to make the adjustment. For us as creators trying to like, show that to people, it's really, it's such an intuitive thing. It's such it changes, the variables change so often. So that's why I think,
Yes, yeah.
memberships like yours and ours are so helpful, because even though there are great resources out there, and everybody learns differently too, like you said,
Yeah.
like reading about a certain thing, and maybe even diagrams and pictures. I mean, they can be helpful, but it's still going to look different when you're actually seeing it in actuality.
Yes. And I also think on somewhere like on our, because we do lots of it in YouTube and Instagram, but there is like a attention span issue.
Yeah,
So
to
like
cram
people
it
like
into 7 seconds.
they search for something. We're not gonna, a lot of the time, unless you get straight to the point. But on but science and pattern card school, you can spend like 20 minutes actually saying why does it happen. So
Right.
that's just fitting, I think, because there's so many, like if you search wrinkles at the crotch, you get all these specific fitting issues. But it's much more interesting. It's like, why does it actually happen?
Yeah,
And
and what's
why
going
the
on with the
garments will
pattern.
hang and stuff. And then you can fix anything to a certain degree. Like the diagonal wrinkle, once you know that's basically, you
Yeah.
can fix just about anything on the body. But it's sort of
Right.
that's not as interesting as specific issues if you want to have views on your website or your blog, isn't it?
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, the different woes of creation.
Yes, yeah, but no, but I think it's really oh, what's I got oh yeah, somebody's saying we did a course using rulers and a book with pictures and explanation to draw the pattern and shapes. Yeah, there's lots of different methods, because you've tried the Luterlo
Yeah,
system again.
Luterlo. Mm,
There is hundreds of different
we
somebody
tried
else.
Luterlo together, actually, I think.
Yes, I was not a fan.
Oh no,
Actually,
it was we
somebody
used
else,
Mrs. Depew. You and I did
It is,
Mrs. Depew, and then I did
yeah,
Luterlo with somebody else, actually.
yeah, but it's the same one, because it only takes your waist and your hip, or something, waist and your bust.
Bust, yeah. I think it's chest
Yeah,
and
okay.
bust, yeah.
But then you might as well buy a sewing pattern. I know it's basically it's because it's like a sewing pattern, but it saves you money. But I just want to draft it because I get so angry if I try something on.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. There's pros and cons to everything, right?
yeah.
But I
I
think
think you're more patient.
I think that like those drafting systems, they work really well. And if like manipulation, and you don't want to learn about all the different manipulation techniques, like that can definitely get you ahead. But I think just like with draping, because people are drawn to draping, like I like draping better because I can see what happens. I totally understand that mindset. But still, when you're draping onto a dress form or a body, you still have to be able to take that off and translate it to a pattern that you can then recreate, unless you're drafting in real fabric, which is I've never done that successfully. I mean, I suppose you could, but I think that that's the thing with both of those techniques, draping and using a drafting up system, a sizing up system. You have to have a base understanding of pattern making to like true your seams and check your balance, and a lot of like I know with the scaling up they don't include the facings and those other pieces that go along with it that you would have to
And I think
have that
something
prior
like
knowledge about.
literally you're basically creating sewing patterns. It's just it fits your bust already.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I find frustrating. Yeah, you get like a finished pattern. Like with draping, at least it fits your size.
True.
I think draping just takes a long time, and unless you have your own mannequin to your size,
To you, yeah.
it's sort of pointless to do it for making your own clothes. I love doing it for, when you're doing a project and you're doing it to a standard sizing. It's actually a
Yeah,
really
just to
good way
get
of
an
working.
idea out or
But you need
something.
different. I agree. Your point. It's a starting point. You still need the universal skills of
Yeah.
understanding how patterns work as well.
Yeah.
And Deborah in my chat is saying, "Do you like Müller and Söhne?" So that's as a German, I should like Müller and Söhne. However, having done most of my fashion education in Britain, in England, which is like Müller and Söhne, I actually want to try it out because I think it's really precise. It's got a lot of measurement. I make a whole fitting book, which is really precise. So I think it'd be really interesting. But it is like you have to have all these measurements and the instructions, a bit like if you Natalie Bray instructions are quite tense.
Are
I
they?
represent the St. Martin's. You don't really do instructions. It's like very creative. So I've been.
And I think I lean more that way as well. But it does make sense. I mean, I think a lot of top engineers, to speak in general terms, but usually like a lot of Germans come from that very engineering mind, which I always like to say. I think somebody said this to me like, oh, that's a great way to describe it. When I said basically pattern cutting or pattern making is that you're a clothing engineer is what you're doing. You're engineering the pattern to fit the body. It's just as.
But I think Trisha and I, we are more the mad professor.
Right.
Something and then
we're more the artists.
Combines it and it works. Yeah.
We get there. Well, and something that I always try to emphasize to people is there's a lot of different ways to do anything, as we've been talking about with these different systems that you can use, these different ways to get there. At the end of the day, as long as you're achieving the end result that you're looking for, then you did it right. Right. And I think that's something that you and I agree on as well.
And I think it's some people who are very technical. So if you come from an engineering background, pattern cutting is really good. But what can get frustrating, when you measure a sleeve 3 times and it's a millimeter,
always a different
each time, I think we sort of have an understanding that there is a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah.
And you're working in fabric. So even, like there are sort of people who do it utterly perfectly. But it can get really frustrating then because sometimes you do a change and you're not quite sure what happened, but it works. So I think having met you from costuming especially, like it's like you work it out the fast way, the easy way, what works, even if it's not maybe always how you were taught in a book. And again, with me, because I come from a creative pattern cutting background, it's again finding solution. If somebody gives you a sketch of some 3D thing, how do you fit it onto a body?
That's a great point.
Outside the box, but the best thing is if you work with somebody who renders all your truing and your grading and stuff, that would be
I think that you bring up a great point, and I wanted to mention this because it did come up. I'm not able to see all the questions as they come in when I'm teaching those classes like I've been doing this week, but I go through afterwards and I look at all the questions. I'm like, oh, I see what they were saying there. I'm trying to not get distracted and get off track. It's so easy to do. But I did notice some conversation in the class yesterday when I was showing them. I showed them how to like walk the sleeve to the bodice so that you can identify how much ease is included. And there was some discussion that started happening in the chat about, oh, I think my problem is I can't be so precise. I'm always off by like 1/8 of an inch. And I think, it's important to remember and for us to remind people there's still flexibility. This isn't like working with wood or metal that isn't going to budge where that I remember I dated a guy who he did automation tech and so worked with measurements, and he would do like set limits within a 32nd of an inch, or like when you're doing digital pattern making, you can go within a 64th of an, and I'm like, I am never that precise, like ever. Because you can be that precise and then you cut it, and depending on what side of the line you cut the pattern on, you're already adding a 16th of an inch. So really, I always kind of anticipate that there's about 1/8 of an inch of play, on any given measurement that you're doing. And yes, you can measure the same thing 3 times and get 3 different measurements, but generally they're not going to be 2 centimeters off from each other. They're going to be, very close. And you just kind of go with the best of 3 or the average, right? Like it doesn't have to be so precise is what I'm trying to say.
Which is what makes it so nice.
Right.
You have that
We do have that flexibility.
And that also, of course, means you can mold the sleeves because you have that
Right.
flexibility. I think that's what makes it so beautiful, that we're not working in paper or metal where you have to be really strict. And Miriam is saying, I have a block which fits great, which was drafted according to Bunka, which is a Japanese fashion school.
Yes, yes.
And she says, I was really surprised because I thought Japanese would not consider fuller bust. No, there is like, if you're looking for, again, you know, if you want to try a different system, the Bunka systems are really good. And the Japanese, we always think of them. But having worked for a English company which mostly sold in Japan.
That's right, yeah.
For the 40 plus market, they are just as not quite as fully busted as some of, you know, but they are a real variety. Japanese women like us come in all shapes and sizes.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, the Bunka system is so technical, but it really...
Well, and I think just like the, you know, in a different way, not just like, but how the Germans are, a lot of Germans and the techniques that come out of Germany are very technical and very practiced, tried and proven. Like they're known for their engineering kind of talents. I think Japanese is also known, especially in garment making.
It's like I think there's like lots
and
of
architecture as well. You know, like
lots of lost crafts, which
right.
only like one craftsman in Japan practices. Yes, if you actually have the Pattern Magic books,
love them.
And
that's why I say that Pattern Magic and Shingo Sato, they're both Japanese. So,
but they got the block in the back, and what it's nice about them, the front and back are calculated differently. So
yeah.
They're really, and that's like, you know, they're actually affordable books. So you can, if you don't want to invest in a whole book of drafting, the Pattern Magic books are great to have, and
they're fun. They're not always super practical.
No.
And it is funny because Pattern Magic, Tomoko is the author of Pattern Magic.
Yeah.
She is very technical, and she does a lot of measurements and the drafts and starting with the block and everything. Whereas Shingo Sato, who's also Japanese, he starts with a basic block. I don't even think he says how to draft his basic block. It's like any basic block that you start with. And then he is on a more of an intuitive, like kind of goes into drawing and creating those shapes like on the body. So he kind of morphs drafting and structure, drafting and draping together. And so their techniques are very different, but they are also very technical in the way that they lay them out, which I find interesting.
But to tell you the truth, because I think when the Pattern Magic books first came out, you can only get them in Japanese, even in, you know, that's because they're written for Japanese market. So I've got the Japanese version. So I've always just sort of looked at the instructions roughly.
Yeah.
And then but that's why pattern cutting skills are so great, because you don't need the diagrams, you don't need the numbers. All you sort of think,
it's just how you're moving the shape around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's universal. I think that's why we're so passionate about it, because whether you're doing green men costumes or vintage pattern cutting, or you're trying something out in a different language, or you want to look at, you know, maybe a garment related to your culture, you want to find out more, it's all universal. You're looking at where I teach the shop owner, she lived in Japan, so she has these kimonos.
Yeah.
And again, really fascinating is how they create
the construction
shape lines for the neckline is completely different to how you'd ever draw it. But you can learn a new skill on how to.
And that's what I love about vintage patterns and vintage drafting, because it's not like our standard bodice blocks with a shoulder seam and a side seam. I love, from a patterner perspective, how the sleeve is incorporated into the bodice and how they get that fit, and it's a different way of the puzzles going together, and it does create a slightly different fit, accentuation in different places. Kristen's saying that's why I've never had a TNT pattern, tried and true pattern. Every time I even make the same pattern, it is different. I mean, so that's true, and it can be frustrating in that respect. But also, the reason that I think it's important to bring it up is that give yourself grace. It's not that you did something wrong. It's just that the variables changed, and so you just have to. I think we just have to know, and I think it's important to reemphasize that With sewing and pattern cutting, it's not always going to be a precise, this is going to work every time. You have to kind of go into it just expecting that there's going to be adjustments, and not beating up on yourself when you run into something like that, and just kind of figuring out to move with the flow and make it work for that situation.
But also what Kirsten has just said, but we actually probably haven't mentioned enough, is that yes, we're talking about pattern cutting in paper, but every time you use a different fabric, the results can be completely different. And I find it especially, for example, with trousers. Like again, like Kirsten, I've got one trouser pattern I've now made 4 times, 4 different fabrics. The fit is completely different, and each time I had to make adjustment. And it's at one point I got so, because I was making in the fabric, I was almost more or less identical. But even if you probably bought the same fabric 6 months later from a different run, it stretches different.
It could be slightly
different. How tightly
different.
is it woven? So so I think that's the thing as well, which makes it really fascinating, because it always keeps your mind active. But it can be really frustrating if you just want to run up your favorite top again, and the fabric is sort of similar, and then it behaves completely different.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of but that's, I think, why we find it so fascinating, because it isn't like you always.
We're here to support you.
Yes,
and help you through it. It's okay. It happens to all of us,
doesn't it? Yeah. So actually, I did a video, and I was talking to my students, just saying like how frustrating it is, and I had to make so many changes. You think, how it's always surprising what patterns it happens with and what fabrics it happens with.
But I think if you're using something that fits well to begin with, you will have adjustments, but you're not going to have major adjustments. It should be minor tweaks or little things that happen. It shouldn't be like major recutting.
No. Yeah, it's sort of annoying in the moment because you expect to put them on.
Right. And then it fits perfect. Yeah.
I do that sort of halfway through the construction. I do a fitting check.
Yep.
And I sort of expect little changes, but sometimes it's surprising. But the great thing is, as you say, the pattern, so you need to pull it up a bit or make it a bit tighter.
Mm-hmm.
With sewing patterns, you haven't done before.
Right, exactly, and that's why
it's going from.
All of us pattern friends are like, get your core group of patterns and then go with that. It's going to make it so much less frustrating.
So even when it's a block. So I love my made-to-measure block.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a sewing pattern you like, use that as your block. And and what, if it fits a bit different, what, but it's a fabric rather than your block.
And one more thing on sleeves, Tamra, I think is who that is, she says, yay, more sleeve talk, just as I was going to work on my muslin for my sleeve again. The great thing about, getting your bodice to fit first and then altering or adjusting your sleeve to fit that new armhole before you go into making the mock-up for your sleeve is that's its own element. So if you're finding that you need different things to change in your sleeve, it's easy. It's one piece that you can go and try some different adjustments. I have a student who's currently working on a button-down shirt, and of course there's no cap, but she wanted to do short sleeves, so they were way pinging up, So I said, well, I was like, you can leave it, but if you want it to fit better, then you're gonna have to add to the cap height, because it's a short sleeve. It makes it so obvious. If it was a long sleeve, I don't think it would be as obvious. And I think button-down shirts are, especially for men, are typically drafted with an extended shoulder because they don't have that extended cap. But she's, having to, because we raised the underarm and we, increase the cap. So basically we're changing the whole shape of the cap because it was very flat. And so her measurement of her sleeve cap was greatly increased compared to the armhole. And so she's now having to where do I adjust and how do I, so I'm I highly recommend this is, since it's such major changes that we're making to the sleeve, do what we think we need to have happen on the pattern and then make up a new sleeve and see how it works. And it's not like making up a whole new garment. You can really take your time to work with that sleeve until you get it right. And then the hope of this with this pattern is that this will then become his, base pattern that she can make things off of.
Yeah, so it's worth spending some time on it, isn't it? Because that's
Yeah.
what's nice about the base pattern. You fit it once, you take longer to fit it, but then it's sort of done fitting. 90% of it has been done forever. Isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Unless
And
you
even
go
if you
through a
have to
major
make
body
changes
change.
because you change figure, you sort of know
Right.
where to adapt it because you know
Right.
everything else fits perfectly.
And even that, I know our friend Natalie down in Australia, she just revisited her sloper. I need to revisit my sloper. I kind of know what adjustments I need to make because my sloper was last made in 2020. So that was 6 years ago. I was on a eating everything out of my garden because I couldn't leave my house situation, working out every day. You know, my body has changed since then. But it's not like a whole major overhaul. You know, it's at doing fine tuning tweaks. It's still going to be worth that initial time to get it right.
Yeah, every 5 years. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, right? That's not bad.
Okay.
And honestly,
Anyway,
it's more out of laziness. I'm like, I know I just add a little bit on the side. It'll be close. It'll be close enough. You know.
I know you've got another class.
I do, so we do have to run.
In a minute. I was going to say, tomorrow there will be a Balenciaga sleeve tutorial on YouTube if you want to see some really amazing 1960s sleeve.
Yes.
Oh, one quick question, because Deborah asked. She said, because she asked me that earlier, on commercial patterns, why do we have an S shape? Good question. So the reason is, that's to do because the sleeve was tightened. So that's what happens. And then might notice, Deborah, but it's always the back which is longer, and that again is like a shortcut to basically help a bit, because we stand like this. So if you have it longer as the back and then short at the front, it looks even in most positions. That's what it's made for.
And you'll notice that on really blousey sleeves as well for women, so that the blouse doesn't like hang over your hand. It's shorter in the front, and you get that blousing effect hanging down from the back.
Yeah, and because when we make the sleeve narrow, we need the right angle here. So you basically have on the front, you have the right angle going up, and then down, and then again you have the right angle there, and then it meets everything basically fits. But literally, because it's a really basic pattern, it's like easily to reproduce, fits most people. But that little bit of difference just means it fits a little bit better.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like not a cheats version, but it's a milder version of an elbow dart, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, that's true. I never thought about it that way. And Tamara says, yes, that's sort of what I'm working on. Needed to do the bicep adjustment, and now I think the cap needs to be, and that's the thing in general, just with pattern making, but especially I find with like sleeves, especially even more than pants, it's like you change one thing and then you have to go back to, do I need to add or decrease to the cap? You know, it's a back and forth situation, tweaking and double checking before you really land, I think, at where you're wanting to go a lot of times. So that's if you're in that process, if you're fitting some sleeves and you're working on fitting sleeves and you're like, I thought I fixed this, and now this is like that is very common to go back and forth, and why both of us are fans of spending the time to fit that one base garment, so that you're not having to do that every time, because if you're picking up a new pattern every time that's drafted with a different block, you're likely to run into a lot of those major adjustments every time, instead of just making design
different
tweaks.
Adjustments each time, depending on what pattern company does it, isn't it? You think like at least try to get that for similar, but no.
Yes.
Well,
this was great, of course. We always jump on and we're like, are we going to have enough to talk about? And then, the hour flies by.
I knew with sleeves we would be running out of time.
That's
true. 10 minutes over time already. We could probably talk for them.
But thank you guys for joining. We always appreciate hanging out with you. If anyone is interested in joining my pattern community, the Pattern Place, the Pattern Place is up there. It is only open until tomorrow, so do check it out. The link I've linked the link in my description. So if you want to check that out, please, we would love to have you and welcome you in. We do have a class that we're going into, print ready patterns with Illustrator. So those of you who like to do digital pattern making, taught by Aronica. So that's what we're about to get into. If you're on this wall, if you've signed up already, if you're part of the community, then you can join us for that. That's a members only class. So I've got to jump off and get ready for that, but we'd love to see you in there if you want to join us. And we'll be back next month. We'll talk about that and let you guys know, but it's typically towards the end of the month on a Thursday. So, and if you guys ever have any topics, that you want us to talk about or you're curious about, we're always looking for what to talk about. And of course, we like to hear from you. We like to hear what you guys are interested in.
Yeah, I think that's more like, yes, we can talk about pattern nerd stuff.
Right. All day, every day.
To you. And I put all the links for Trisha, those pattern plays, and also for
thank you.
what I've got coming up in my description, so you can find them all there. But lovely to see you, Trisha, and lovely to see all of you in the chat. And it's been fantastic topic as always, and fascinating too. But that's it from us for today. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.